in-house today to break down the world of fiction, because we've been living in the fiction, birth bonds, Federal Reserve, U.S. Service Corporation, so on and so forth. We have Russell Jay Gould. He is in-house today, very special guest. And let's go to Unrestricted Truths, unpack everything, let's roll.
By 4 shaped flag, that's a boat flag. Now pay attention to the field. The field here is 3 by 4. That's contract. When it's square, those are military. If you have a 3 by, this is a 12 by 17. That's a military base flag. It'll look like a contract flag, but it's really a military base flag. And this is the ones that you see on top of your courthouses, because and if they put a ball on top of the court to your flagpole, they're advertising for the draft and advertising for the military. If they have a spear on top of your flagpole, it's for military court-martials. So anytime you walk into a state court and you have a spear on top of the state flag, they may take the federal flag out and just use the state flag, but you're not in the military. So they're declaring a military court-martial. Because now you're no longer in North Carolina, you're in a foreign vessel in dry dock, which is a military vessel. That's why they have police officers, they're military, in the courtroom. Then your eagle is used only for the President of the United States. If its wings are this way, if they're this way, it's postal, and if it's this way, it's Vatican banking. So pay attention to the shapes and ornaments that are on flags. There's 11 flags in the United States.
11 flags, United States. And for the average American, including me, certainly when I was younger, you see an American flag, you see an American flag. Sometimes with gold trimmings, sometimes an eagle on top, sometimes not, so on and so forth. You just think an American flag is American flag. There's 11 types. Russell Jay Gould can certainly weigh in on this and will on today's show, among other items. And let's just jump into it. So this is James GRUNDVIG, an American Media Periscope on Unrestricted Truths, DEFCON 5 show with my co-host Josh Reed. You can find us at ampnews.us. This show is brought to you by our lead sponsor, Kirk Elliott, PhD, Private Advisors. Let's bring on the guest image, and Josh, you could read the brief bio about Russell Jay Gould.
All right. In his latest documentary film, Last Flag Standing, Russell Jay Gould brings closure to the 2000 Florida Chads, which marked the end of the United States of American Corporation as a result of the third and final U.S. bankruptcy of 1999, where Gould figured out the secret to legally capturing America based on the very postal codes and flag mechanics they had been running on. For 2 decades, Russell Jay Gould has been using these universally recognized flag laws, plus his secret weapon, the mathematical language, quantum grammar, to disqualify the constructs of hundreds of corrupt governments and global organizations to steer them away from using their power unjustly against the people. Despite having the tools, the bad guys chose to carry on as per usual, most recently by creating one of the largest fraudulent global pandemics in history. His movie connects the dots on the fraud and other atrocities that have occurred on our planet and brings forward Russell Jay Gould as our guide away from the nonsense of the fiction movement and into truth, correctness, honor, and dignity. And let's welcome Russell Jay Gould to the show. Russell, how are we doing today?
I'm doing good. You know, I sat here listening to what you guys had to say about these fraudulent voting apparatuses. And I would like to say shame on the people that have conveyed this against the will of the people of our country. They all need to be put in light. We need to shine the light on them. And we outnumber them. The good people outnumber the bad people. So I want the general public to know that up front. As the citizens of our communities who love our families, who love our neighbors, who support our local businesses, they're the ones that are going to win here. We are the winners because we outnumber them. Keep truth and moral value always on the forefront when you deal with these shameful people that steal the cups of the will of the people. And the will of the people should be satisfied in a way that is fair into our communities. James and Joshua, when we look at the logistical support and material readiness of setting up a poll and setting up the position to come in and vote, we need to move that position into a very neutral state. And using the military is a very fair concept. However, there are mechanics that have to be put in place because we don't know exactly who's voting, right? So how is it that a 21-year-old can go into a liquor store and gets carded? And they're part of a community, so we at least can identify who they are. The same thing needs to hold true as we look at voting in our polls and voting in our communities. They need to be a part of the community. That's what makes us great, is the sovereignty of who we are as a people and the capacity to be part of something greater than us, right? To build our communities, to have baseball games with our loved ones, with our kids, and to support our local apparatus. These are the things when these people, shamefully disrupt the quality and the conditions of our election functions. This is what I've looked at in my quantum grammar system, is how to make a level playing field for where the people have that fairness. And using the military would be a fine position, but there needs to be the mechanics put in place for the logistical support of the people, so we at least know who's voting and that they're part of the community. Because it's very unfair to bring an outside source in to vote in your community and they don't live there because they don't know the needs of the people there. It's always about the needs of the people. You go down to the local coffee shops, you go sit with the people at the baseball games or the basketball games, and you see what their concerns are, what they're struggling with. And then we try to identify that. And this is what I've set up in the quantum grammar system, allow more of an autonomy where the people are more in charge of their lives, where the government is more of a backdrop. And we allow the will of the people to come forward. So I've taken a look at the Federal Elections Commission and their guidelines to elect presidents and senators and these, and I've looked at found their sentence structure to be fraudulent because of the fraudulent grammar that they were using these negative words, because words have meanings. And so I identified that in 2012 at the Federal Elections Commission in Washington, D.C., and then in 2016 as well. And so they're very cognizant of my position in the quantum construct to give people a position of fairness. So hopefully that helps your audience comprehend, as I'm watching the logistics of what you guys are saying, know that there is a solution on the table. It is in place for the citizens, but it's up for good people to step up and make that choice if they so choose to use the logistics to make a fair and neutral. And the polls should be a position of neutrality, where we're not directing people how to vote, but giving them people free choice of who they feel is the best candidate for their needs in their venues. And venues are set up by flags. And I'm glad you put that protocol on earlier about the flag etiquettes, because flags have values. And those values change the condition of terms when you enter into poll locations. So those are some of the mechanics that I've set up with the Federal Elections Commission in Washington, D.C. in quantum grammar, to give a position where you have a ball on the flag standard, right? Because what are you doing there? You're creating contract, right? You're directing the draft of what you choose as the will of the people, what direction you want to go. So the first thing you would want to do to set up a poll correct is you'd want to put a ball on the flag standard, both outside the foreign vessel and dry dock, otherwise known as the poll building, and as the citizens come into the building, they have a ball on top of the flag standard. That way they know they're safe. They have a safe position to give closure on the will of who they want to draft or who they want to vote for. So the ball standard would go on top of the flag standard as you set the venue, because the venue must sit in neutrality for the people to make their choices. So these are some of the things that we've looked at in setting up the criteria to vote for leaders into position. And we want to make this as fair as we can for the people. And we want to give the people full closure so they know what they're walking into. Because the first rule of contract is closure. Once there's closure, then there's comprehension and knowledge to make a determination on what you choose to convey in your life and the sovereignty of your lives. So there's many aspects of sovereignty and many concepts of sovereignty. You can be sovereign in your heart, or you can be sovereign, as it comes onto paperwork. And so this is what I've looked at in the quantum grammar world, is how to step outside of the construct and paradigm of sovereignty to actually know what that means for oneself. So thank you guys for that monologue you guys had at the beginning, because shame on those people for doing this against all the people of our great country.
On the word closure, I never thought of a contract that way. and I find it very interesting. As a mountain climber when I was young, it was always called, what's the exit strategy? Climbing a mountain is the goal, but actually the real goal is getting off the mountain safely. So how do I get off the mountain, right? So closure and exit strategy, that sounds almost like the same word. So when you go into contract, you talk about closure. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Yeah, full closure, we call it, closure is knowing the terms of contract, right? Knowing what the words mean and the value of what words mean. And this is where the quantum grammar, where we use prepositional phrases to preset the facts, right? So we can now look at the facts for what they are. And as you know, James and Josh, facts don't have feelings, right? So now we don't have to have an emotional feeling about the facts, but now we can look at why the facts were performed. And now we have a comprehension and we have knowledge. And as we have knowledge, then we set up that knowledge platform and we lay it out in a venue that we can have what we call communion or joinder with the facts, right? I don't like to use the word usury because that's the old ideology of contract, right? I wanted to use more of a word that is contract communion, which means that we're communing with the concept because we concur with the terms of what's being articulated to convey a certain act or performance. And the voting is a prime place to start because you have to give the people that neutral position. And it's actually the military's job to set up a neutral position for the people, for a safe haven for us to be in, right? So different branches have different logistical functions, but they're all tied to the post office. And what that means is before a soldier goes into the military, they have to go get their military registration ID number first. Once they get their military ID number, then they can go into their prospective branch of where they test into or where they want to be in life. And so it's a postal construct. And as I was involved, as many of your audience knows, in the largest court-martialing in the history of planet Earth, and some of the things that I was privileged, because you got to comprehend, the Pentagon trained me, right? They trained me to be a leader and to know the mechanics of what it is to be an actual commander-in-chief. So some of the things that you'd want to put in place for the soldiers that would convey this act of neutrality for the people is you'd want to make sure that your commissions are run correct so that you maintain the rules of the continuance of evidence to safeguard the soldiers who are forming that position of neutrality for the people, because soldiers work for the people and the people must remember how to direct that.
Wow. Josh, go ahead. Thank you, Russell.
Well, I agree with everything you're saying, Russell. Now, I'm curious about the historical element of it. How does this get attached to the post office? What was significant about the post office in the early America that brought this about?
Well, Benjamin Franklin was working for the British Crown, and he was doing surveying for post roads to set up ports and venues for the British monarchy to come up through Canada, and they were in conflicts, of course. He was also working with France. He was a French barrister at the same time. And so he was changing hats in the middle of performing, setting up these commercial merchant venues to allow trade to happen. So the post office was gaining ground as it was used as a mark to identify commerce and goods moving from point A to point B, right? And so that would dealt with the postage stamps and setting up what they call postiliums. And I was blessed enough to get into the private books of Benjamin Franklin at the Benjamin Franklin Post Office in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So I have a different perspective about 1775, 1776, based upon the money and the usury that people were engaged in. And unfortunately, a lot of the founding fathers were not given full closure on some of these nefarious games that were being played behind the scenes. They had good volition, or good, you would call it intent, but I call it volition, right? Condition of mind. They had a good condition of mind because they were wanting to set up a utopia for their families and for their loved ones. Heck, that's a wonderful idea. And at the same time, separate from the theology and some of the things that they were running from over in Europe, right? So they had their own way of thinking, and that was on them. And they were sovereign, right? They were sovereign in their position to set that up. Unfortunately, they used those tools as commercial instruments, the banking systems have, and the postal systems, to do away with our rights and not tell us, and then create this dilemma that we have of where they're setting this global theater of martial law up against we the people and not giving us any solutions to a function to create settlements for we the people, because the people have been damaged here just by having to learn all this. I've been damaged just by having to learn all this myself. I'm not complaining, but I'm setting up a scenario to where I can say, hey, look, here's a platform that, because of the meritocracy of the shipping war that I didn't set up, but that they had set up, I've set it up on a macro level, taking it all the way to the Universal Postal Union to break all the ties from the banking games that were being played against we the people. Because look, I'm a free venture capitalist, right? I love free venture capitalism, right? I think that it's one of the best things on the planet. Unfortunately, the statutory laws and the rules and regulations for moving goods from point A to point B have overwhelmed the capacity of the normal citizen who is struggling just to start a business, right? It's very unfair what's happened from a red tape, what I call a red tape position, where from your LLCs to all the guidelines for setting up a business, all of that needs to be really taken back and really placed into the hands of the people, right? Because it's our market trade port, it's our sovereignty. It is not the government's position to dictate the will of the people. And so how we take a look at that is we take a look at what I did is I took a look at the construct of setting up corporate structure to allow sovereignty of meritocracy to convey during this unfortunate global theater of this war zone that they were trying to set up. And so in doing so, setting up and looking at the material readiness and logistics of shipping and corporate structure, it took me into many theaters around the world. And those theaters weren't always the best of places, because I was normally surrounded by people that were against of free sovereignty, of free choice. And you always have to give the people that capacity of sovereignty to not make it an illusion of choice, but to actually pull off the parameters. And as you know, we're under constant bombardment of what we take in, the social engineering, let alone the geoengineering. If you watch some of the stuff in the geoengineering, it is very dangerous, and how they're trying to manipulate the mind. And so I've developed what's called a claim of the life system, which now drops you out of that birth certificate system to allow one to claim their life, to claim their space. And I don't have to manage it, because for me, government isn't about management, it's about self-government from what comes in. So the geoengineering that is happening against the citizens is so rampant with the 5G and all the things, the chemtrails, and all the things that we're seeing out here, the graphene oxide, how they're trying to tie into everything, and the subliminal messaging. I mean, I don't have to tell you guys about the harmonics of music and all these things that they're using to support, to contradict the moral value of who we are as people, of God, you might call it God-fearing. Well, I don't know each person. I'm not going to put a theology on it, because it's up to us to find, the God and the peace within our heart, and to be one with that. And I don't want to ever trespass. A lot of people try to get me to trespass into theology. Everyone's on their own quest based upon their own knowledge, right? And different people have different experiences. So don't judge people from the outside, because we've never walked a day in one's shoes. And so I try not to be judgmental towards people. I try to just really focus on my walk and my journey, and stay self-centered within being grounded, and trying to make the best sample to the world of, hey, there's a system in play. There's a lot of claimants out here now using the quantum grammar system, using it to set up their businesses, right? Because we have to think outside the box here, because the box that they've created and the paradigm that they've created creates a dilemma inside of me that I feel like I'm being damaged by just walking outside the door and looking up in the sky and seeing the chemtrails and seeing all the nonsense. Shame on those people for doing that. Who's allowing this to happen? We outnumber them. The good people outnumber them. We can identify them, and then we just need to have the courage and the leadership to round them up. So hopefully the world can see what I've done in that scale, to set a haven up, so that the bad guys, or the thinking that causes damage to me, and I'm not going to say to you guys, because I don't want to generalize, but from what I'm witnessing from my position, the damage is me, that it is stopped and it's turned off. The food and all the things that they've given us, it's just nonsensical. The insurance companies, the pharmaceuticals, and everything that's stepped into play, the lobbyists, as you know, you're in the political world, so you guys see these things. It's unfair, because it all is engineered for a war against who we are as mankind. And so these games need to stop. And I've set up a quantum grammar system to take control of our now space and weed these concepts and ideologies and backdrop them out of our life, as well as hold people and concepts accountable for this war that they've conveyed against us.
Russell, that is a great download of information. We're going to take our first commercial break. We're going to come right back. I do want to talk about the birth bonds, the quantum grammar, and everything else with Josh Reed and Russell J. Gould. We'll be right back. Word from our sponsor.
Government-induced inflation, taxes, rising interest rates, political instability. All of these can have a crushing effect on our investments, often causing the stock market to go down. But they can also cause gold and silver to go up.
Hi, this is Dr. Kirk Elliott. Buy gold, buy silver, buy now, but buyer beware. Precious metals companies are not created equal. As a PhD economist, I have been in the financial, economic, and precious metals business for 3 decades. The philosophy of my firm is people over profit. I encourage you to read my bio to learn more about me at kirkelliottphd.com.
Now is the time to own physical metals in an IRA, 401k, and outside of a retirement plan. Don't let the government destroy your hard-earned assets any longer. Call 720-605-3900 or visit kirkelliottphd.com.
I was born, my mother and father named me James Otar GRUNDVIG, right? My father's last name, which was changed 150 years ago, used to be Hansen. Otar, my father's first name, old Viking name, and James from the Bible. Pretty straightforward. And then a few days later, not the same day, not my birthday, but a few days later, you'd end up with a birth certificate that would be all caps. And I want to ask Russell about the all caps and that birth bond that was given to me and every other American that's probably been born in the last 70, 80 years. Let's bring on Russell.
Yes.
Russell, the birth bond.
Oh, this crime against us. Yes, yes. So first of all, they do several things on there that separate us from our complete position as the beings on this planet, right? And the first thing they do is they put the mother's maiden name and the father's surname. So they make you 50-50. They don't make the oneness of the love, the commitment, the communion between the husband and wife who use their sweat equity to birth the child, right? So right there, they're starting at the separation point. And the other thing that is really baffling is they have us in all capital letters. Well, when you study shipping and how vessels move, being ships, vessels have names and numbers, right? And the birth certificate has a number, right? And it has a name, and the name is capitalized, and same as it is on a ship. So they've made you dead on paperwork called a nom de guerre. And that nom de guerre, then they put a certified seal on that, otherwise known as a bill of lading from the doctor's office, and they autograph that seal, initial the seal, and they move it into your vital statistic records through the Department of Health. And then they use that certificate for every aspect as you get educated and you step up into your facets as you grow in life. Unfortunately, the babies that come into the world are innocent of, or I should say fortunately, not unfortunately, they're innocent of all these mechanics that are being run against them. And the first rule of contract is closure, knowledge, right? The babies and the beings that come into the earth, they have no knowledge of this system that's been put in place to trap them into this condition of state of fiction, right? This lie, this condition that they use to control our lives. And so the babies are innocent. They're in is a preposition to a word means no. So they're in nonsense, which is correct. They have no knowledge of what's happening to them, right? And this is a crime that's being committed on a day-to-day level against the citizens of the world. And what I figured out is how to change that function using what I call a claim of the life, and tie it into the shipping world of meritocracy that was set up against us. And it was all the ties were tied through the post office of the specific country you're in, And that specific country that you're in authorizes the central banking systems of the countries that you're in. And then they tied you into this tentacle of usury on their money, saying, well, you're using our stuff, therefore you're our chattel, or you're our goods, right? So what I did is I stepped outside that, and the umbrella hub for the postal constructs here in the United States, for the United States Post Office as well as the United States Postal Service, is the Universal Postal Union in Bern, Switzerland. And in 2001, I was challenging the logistics of the grammar that was being used on contract to set up the Universal Postal Union in Switzerland as a hub for central control on the countries of the world, on the country's central post offices for each country. And on June 18th of 2003, I had a face-to-face meeting for 4 hours in Bern, Switzerland, with the heads of the Universal Postal Union. The United States Post Office was there, a man by the name of James Gunderson, and he was there with the United States Postal, I call them no-spectors, because in means no as a prefix to a word. He was there with the postal no-spectors, and we had a conversation about setting up jurisdiction and venue for corporate structure. I answered a lot of questions, a lot of classified questions of technology, and they told me at the end of the meeting that in the history of mankind, no one had ever articulated now-space jurisdiction for words on paper, nor had anyone filed for now-space jurisdiction on flag etiquette, on the laws of the flag, because the flag sets the venue as the bearer of the flag. It gave me the jurisdiction to set the terms for what I was doing. And they were content with that, right? They were like, it's never been done, it's never been looked at. You're looking at, and I was breaking down and explaining to them about parse. James, Josh, parse is simply the studying of how words are formed. That's called syntax, the order of operation. What makes a word an adjective? What makes a word a pronoun? What makes a word a verb? What makes a word an adverb? What makes a word a position, set, fact, right? And I put everything into a now space scenario of corporate structure to drop the whole position of the birth certificate system off planet Earth. As you know, this caused me a lot of grief because they were very upset that I had figured this out, because I'm not like one of them, right? I wasn't trained in their schools. I'm just a guy from Wyoming, right? And they had a backlash against me that influenced every aspect of my life. Unbeknownst to me, figured out many years later, because the PSYOP and the war against our condition of mind is massive. And we have to weed through that and be pretty humble and neutral as we find ourselves, right? Because the easiest person to fool is yourself. You have to be honest with yourself and manage and self-manage, because the strength comes from within out, not out from within. That's sovereignty, right? Sovereignty is being able to stay balanced in the position of strife, to be balanced in the position of hatred, to put your needs on the table and then be able to communicate them in a way that others can commune with. Because of the quantum grammar and the mathematical interface there, and the synonyms of using positive performance words, we can look at words from English to Chinese, Chinese to Farsi Arabic to Portuguese to Spanish to Italian, and take it back to English, and we lose no deviation in our sentence structure in a now space jurisdiction. And that had never been identified or done on the history of planet Earth. And so it was a very unique, they said I was a solitary condition of the state, that I had set up a venue outside the birth certificate system, right? Which had never been looked at, identified, and performed, right? Because I was actually at that meeting in Bern, Switzerland, with no passport, and simply using my claim, well, not simply, but using my claims of the life and my contracts with the Pentagon for muster master functions. And I was, literally ordering, commissioning vessels to safeguard me as I navigated through foreign waters. And I had the Department of Navy meet me in France as well as Italy on that venture to have conversations with me about what I was doing because of the classified tech of putting vessels, maritime vessels, war vessels into oceanic theater functions. And I'm very skilled at that as a commander-in-chief. These are some of the things that, the Pentagon had trained me up on inadvertently as I was going toe-to-toe with them. So they didn't like come out and train me. I was challenging jurisdiction, trying to stop the crimes of the Iraqi war and the Afghanistan war against the American soldiers, as well as the American people and the citizens of Iraq and Afghanistan. Coming off the fraudulent moves of 9/11, which was a ruse to steal the citizens' rights of this country and the citizens' rights of the worldwide, as well as start a massive war where they got the ideology of the American citizen to be hated by the world for these terrible acts that these bad actor fake presidents were doing against the genocide and the stealing of wealth and money on a global level. So the American people were looked at and are looked at as the bad guy, and yet the bad guys aren't the American people. The American people are good, right? Unfortunately, it's the people that have stolen their positions and subjugated their ideologies against the people and against the world. And, of course, the citizens of the world should have every right to be upset a little bit at the American people because we have been quite complacent. But there's a lot of good people in the last couple of years standing up and trying to do good things and trying to blow the whistle on these nefarious acts that have been committed against the citizens of the world. And so when the Pentagon, I learned those mechanics of shipping, I was going toe-to-toe with them and doing a lot of classified things in that court-martialing. So inadvertently, they trained me up, and I was able to use those techniques to put vessels and ships into foreign place to give me security. And the military came and talked to me about that as I navigated from those meetings from the Vatican and Switzerland. They were very perceptive, and their conversations were very kind. And they would go like this: we have a foreign vessel in dry dock, or a foreign vessel in foreign waters, and he's using a cause and a consequence and a possession and authority and a sentence structure. And they said, what is he missing? I said, well, he's missing the verb of thinking, but the thinking will never change the condition of the facts or the acts because they're actually fact. And the guy says, yeah, you're him. And then they pull me off to the side because I didn't have a passport or a driver's license or a state ID. I was using my claim of the life to go through the ports. They waited for me to get through the ports, customs to get me through the ports in those specific venues because I had established a now space port for jurisdiction that had never been looked at. And the Pentagon was very, the Department of Navy specifically, was very intrigued with what I had done. They asked me many very good questions. I sat with them, had a beer for a couple hours and just talk shop, right? Nothing, out of the ordinary. But they were monitoring the situation, and well, they should be. Right? I'm a citizen that actually cares about the country. I'm a citizen that actually went in and I wrote a lease contract, and the Secretary of Navy's office signed off on the lease contract and leased the Title IV flag from me. Right? I did that. I cared. Right? I didn't want the soldiers to be in false wars. I didn't want the soldiers to have to go through the things that they went through. And it's crime against them. I've done everything that I can, and I'm hoping for good soldiers that someday that will sit up and show the videos because the Pentagon was at the court-martialing, right? They had 20, 30 cameras on me at all times. It's an actual thing. Right? It's not hocus pocus. The cameras were there. They comprehend exactly what I was trying to do. And they just said, we outnumber you, bad guys to good guys. And the bad guys were in control. Right? And so the citizens of planet Earth need to be cognizant that the American people are not guilty here. The American people, when you see these false concepts of scaring us into nuclear wars, we are not the bad guys. The American people know who the bad guys are. And we are doing the best of our capacity to stop this against us. I'm doing everything I can to educate the general public on that there's a system in place. And you guys are doing what you can to say, hey, there's a crime happening here against us. See, and so we're working in concert because we have the same concept. We're about freedom. We're about love, happiness, neutrality. We want free venture capitalism, right? This is a wonderful concept. This is what the foundation of who we are as a people was made, right? And so as they've denigrated our moral values, as they've blurred our borders, as they've created all these scenarios to create a war against us, it's really valuable to stay focused right now and stay committed to our moral values of correctness of being honest with ourselves. And I encourage everybody, do the correct thing when no one's looking. Because when you do that, that changes the paradigm around the consequences and the things that happen around you. So when no one's looking, and you have the choice to be a leader, or you have a choice to, convey money for the people, or do the correct thing for the people. Because people want a righteous leader. People want that. I know I'll raise my hand and I'll get behind someone that has a righteous value to them. Someone that actually cares and can actually do something. And, what I did, people throw a lot of stones at me. Don't judge me. Take a look at the works, and please comprehend that I was setting this up in the fight or flight situation where I was under much duress, much harassment. And so to throw stones at me because I did a massive court martialing against this person or that person, I did not know who they were, right? And I had to go after the facts that I was dealing with. The facts that I was dealing with is there was people being genocided against in Iraq and Afghanistan, right? These are the facts that I was given. These are facts that, they're shooting missiles at our Pentagon, but it's our bad guys in our Pentagon shooting missiles at our own Pentagon, right? There's no plane, right? These are facts. Facts don't have feelings, right? So I don't have feelings about it, but I can be conscious of it. And then upon that, I made the choices that I felt necessary to try to safeguard myself and the citizens of this country. So you can throw people before you judge me. Just know that I had the best concern and I was doing the best I could with the data that I had and the closure that I had for the people of the world.
Very good, Russell. We're going to take our last commercial break. We're going to come right back with Josh Reed asking Russell some questions. By the way, my father was a shipbroker, and my mother was born into a shipping dynasty out of Bergen, Norway. Who knew? Maybe I should have studied maritime law more myself, but I'm getting an education today. We'll be right back with Russell Gould and Josh Reed.
Stand out from the status quo. Let them know you're a patriot with the Patriot Pin. We feature an entire line of 14-karat gold-plated pins, starting at $4.45. Challenge coins, only $17.45 each. And decals, only $6.45 each. Order now and get a free gift at thepatriotpin.com.
The law of the land was the Ten Commandments, God's law. The law of the sea, something a little different, maritime law. Did Jesus walk in the water? Was that just a miracle, or was Jesus walking on top of the maritime laws that were not God's law? Let's bring on Russell and Josh. And Josh, go ahead and ask Russell a great question.
Well, Russell, thank you for being on with us and sharing all this knowledge and information with us. Now, we were talking about the post office and setting this up. And to me, this looks like kind of an extension of admiralty law that was brought into the land through basically government interaction. And the way they set up the post offices was for interstate exchange with a monetary aspect involved in it, so they can control the goods and services exchanged through each state. With that being said, this means that there's also this monetary foundation to all contract law that comes out there. Typically, every contract is a give and take relationship of either energy or work or whatever this might be. And this is kind of where money derives into. Talk to us a little bit about the quantum banking system and how this is the solution to this old slave debt money credit system that we currently have.
Great question. So number one, so the quantum system is like a bridge, and on that bridge, when you go to cross the bridge, there's a toll to it, right? And that toll is what they call the fee for freight, right? Once they have the fee for freight, and that's through what we call a claim of the life, right? You get a claim of the life, and you claim your life. At that point, you start to learn about these tentacles of usury that we've been caught up in. Usury from our jobs, right? A usury from going to school, giving our birth certificate, all these things of what they've set up the straw man, our bank accounts. This is going to allow, it's very difficult to set up a bank. I have a question for you guys. This is one question. Would you guys open a bank if there was a bunch of criminals running around?
No.
No, of course not.
Of course not. So the quantum banking system is ready to go. It has assets behind it, copious amounts, because of the chemistry and the things that I've found and learned about. But it's very difficult to implement that to the people right now because there's so many bad guys running around. So as the bad guys get eliminated, then the liberties and the things can be, the technology can be released to the people. It's unfair for me as the creator of quantum banking to turn around and say, well, here you go. And then people get clobbered with it because the bad guys are using this technology against us. What I mean by that is, if you look at Bill Clinton and his sex trial, he comes out and says, depends on what the definition of is. Well, that's a grammar statement, right? Of is an adverb making is a verb. He pauses and makes the second is a noun. The pause is a comma. It's a procedure, right? It's showing you that procedure has jurisdiction over the subject matter of sexual relations. So unfortunately, the bad guys have their hands. That's why this is not open source technology, right? This is copyrighted technology. The bad guys can't use this against we, the people, to hold them accountable for their actions. Now, at the time of that specific trial, I had not been to the U.S. Supreme Court and learned those secrets and was not the chief judge there when that was happening. Otherwise, I would have showed up. Right, I showed up in the 2020 presidential election in D.C. and I had a blast over there with the fake election that happened, just because they I'm chief judge there, right? I get to be me, but the general public was unaware of this, right? And both sides know now. They did not know at the time that I was chief judge, right? Both sides of what they would call these parties, right? These Democrats and these Republicans, both now have learned about my position as chief judge. But it took actually going into the floor and sitting down with the different entities with U.S. Secret Service and giving them the full documentation on the layout of my position as chief judge of the U.S. Supreme Court. Once it was identified, and I sat a couple hours with them, once at Mar-a-Lago, Florida, and once in Anastasia Bowling in Washington, D.C., a military base. And once they saw the documentation, they're like, well, you're chief judge at the U.S. Supreme Court. I says, yeah. They're like, well, how come we didn't know that? I says, if you were a bad entity, would you want any recollection of correctness out there that would compromise my ability to make a decision and influence your life? And they go like, well, no. And I'm like, well, one of the Secret Service guys at Mar-a-Lago is like, well, how long are you going to be chief judge? I says, well, for the rest of my life, or until we can get people in there that have the best concern on procedure, on what it takes to be a judge. Not you just can't put people in place that don't know about communication. You can't put people in place that don't know anything about shipping and all the bailments that come with going into a foreign vessel in dry dock, otherwise known as the courthouse. So people have learned, and hopefully that they've learned to the best of the will of the people.
Fantastic.
John,
Now,
we got about three minutes left. I definitely want to bring Russell back in the near future.
oh yeah.
Go ahead and ask a question. We'll let Russell close out.
So, Russell, what do you see coming about pertaining to this mRNA technology that is patented, that is being brought into people's bodies, in the sense of basically a servitude of these people, because now they are held under the Supreme Court decision that came about back in 2014?
Well, first of all, there's a couple things. I'm seeing good doctors from all aspects and all walks of life coming forward with their solutions to clear the graphene oxide and things out of people that have been tricked maliciously into this concept that you put something in your body and somebody owns you, right? This is not true. The U.S. Supreme Court can only give you an opinion. They're not stating a fact. So keep that in mind when you're dealing with those fake judges at the U.S. Supreme Court. It is only their opinion. And as a foreign vessel in dry dock, otherwise known as the U.S. Supreme Court, which is under control of the Port Authority, which is under control of the Post Office, which has all been slid under FEMA, under the Emergency War Powers Acts, right? This is they can only have jurisdiction for 12-mile radius, right? So don't take their contracts too serious because they say nothing. and the fee for freight on their bills of the lading. They are the trickiest people in the world at the U.S. Supreme Court when it comes to placing file stamps on your document. I've had them place September 31st as a date on my file stamp. I show up there at 0900 and they're putting 1000 on there, right? So I've moved through the positions of space on them and corrected them in many different ways. But if their lips are moving and they're writing on paperwork out of the U.S. Supreme Court right now, they're lying to you. So the general public has to know that, and they have to be able to come within that. Don't be upset about it. Just know how to be. It's a war theater. You've got to be flexible. You've got to overcome. You've got to see your goal. You've got to stay on point. You got to network, and you got to make sure that everybody's on the same page, so that we catch these bad guys in this position of space, and we hold them accountable. Not where they get to run away, but where we get to take their money from them. The quantum banking system. In my quantum banking system, I have a system set up where if you're a bad guy, we get parallel what we call voluntary bankruptcy. We get to take all your assets because the assets were gained through fraudulent means. And then those assets can't be used to promote your family or pay for you or whatever you got coming your way, because there's some punishment here that what they did with this graphene oxide is seditious.
Yeah.
It's beyond treason.
Yep.
It's pure murder. And we know how we're supposed to treat murderers, right? That this is
Yeah.
we know what to do with them. It's just a matter of having the courage and getting the people rounded up. And it's a difficult task because they have so many, rogue elements out here, these black ops running. But the black ops people, guess what? Their family gets to die too. So they have to smarten up. They get to, because what I mean by that, they get to die too, is they got vaccinated, right?
Right.
They got tricked too.
Yeah.
Right. So these supposed killers for all these bad guys better smarten up and realize you take care of the good people, because the good people are going to put solutions on the table for you to clear this out of your body. Right. That's a fact. There are good doctors that I know in different places trying all kinds of things to get the graphene oxide out. And as we see that, we see the bad killers that backstop these people. They're going to have to make that sovereign choice for themselves. Do they want to wipe out their own families in this stupid game, or are they going to smarten up and say, hey, look, the good guys are correct here. Let good and correctness win. And that's what I'm counting on, is the will of the people. And, look, they got their kids vaccinated. Do you know the complications for that? Right? These people have done this. Shame on them. Shame on them. And we will catch them. And the good people will rally behind that. And I'm telling you right now, I don't want to see anybody get hurt, but the people that have done this, they need to be held accountable for their convictions of creating this murderous, treasonous act against we the people. And we're going to get them. We're going to get them. Yep. And
Russell J. Gould,
quantum grammar.
thank you very much.
Catch him in the now space.
I love it. I'm going to educate myself. No amnesty, that's for sure. Josh Reed, thank you very much. Josh, I'll see you on Friday. And we're going to continue this. Russell, I definitely want to bring you back on, because this is a tremendous, in-depth conversation that we, the people, need to hear. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.